the slap of a screen door at 6 in the morning, the hiss of bacon grease in a skillet on a wood stove, the sweet steam of apple butter in a copper kettle by the woodshed, stirred with a paddle as long as a child. That was Sunday in small-town America for most of a century. Number 17 fed 20 harvest hands in one sitting on a Kansas farm in 1938. Number 9 took the blue ribbon at the Iowa State Fair 4 years running. Number 2 sold for 10 cents a square at every church bake sale from 1948 to 1979. These 25 recipes were not restaurant food. They were threshing crew food, church supper food, county fair food, and front porch food, cooked by women who fed whole towns from a closet-sized pantry. Hit subscribe for more vintage Americana. Here are the 25 country recipes that defined small-town America. Number 25. Buttermilk biscuits with sausage gravy. A pie tin of biscuits coming out of the oven before the rooster finished his second crow. The cook crumbled fresh pork sausage into a heavy skillet, sprinkled flour over the drippings, and poured in milk straight from the morning bucket. She did not measure. Her hand knew the weight of a cup of flour the way a fiddler knows a tuning peg. In Appalachia, they called it sawmill gravy because the sawmill men ate it before sunup, 3 biscuits split open, the gravy ladled thick. A working breakfast for a working day. The ingredients cost almost nothing. The skill cost a lifetime. Nobody had to teach her, and she never had to teach anybody. You watched, you asked, you learned. Her biscuits had layers like a hymnal had pages, and the leftover gravy went into a bowl on the back of the stove where her husband could find it at midnight. Number 24. Apple butter from the copper kettle. A copper kettle the size of a washtub, set on iron legs over a hardwood fire burning since before sunrise. Bushels of windfall apples, peeled by every cousin in the county, simmered down to a dark sweet paste the color of molasses. 2 grandmothers traded the long wooden paddle. The paddle never left the bottom of the pot, because the second it did, the apples scorched and a whole day tasted like ash. In West Virginia and the Pennsylvania foothills, apple butter stir-offs go back over 200 years. Families showed up at first light with peelers and patience, and left at dusk with quart jars warm in their laps. It was free food and a free festival in one autumn day. You stirred when somebody handed you the paddle. You ate cornbread off a tin plate. You went home with your sleeves smelling like cider for a week. Number 23. Blackberry cobbler. A heavy bowl of berries picked along a rural fence line where the briars tore your sleeves and your knuckles bled by the second pail. The cook dumped them into a buttered pan, sugared them by handful, and dropped lumps of biscuit dough across the top like clouds. 40 minutes in a wood oven and the juice came up purple around the edges. A spoonful with cold cream from the spring house and you tasted summer. What most people miss about cobbler is that it was never one recipe. It was whatever fruit grew within a half-mile of the back door. Peaches, sour cherries, gooseberries, mulberries. The dough was the constant. The fruit was the place. Her family ate it warm. They ate it cold for breakfast. They ate it standing up at the counter, and they fought over the corner pieces where the juice had baked into the crust. Number 22. Vinegar pie. Ingredients on the kitchen counter: a cup of sugar, 3 eggs, 2 tablespoons of cider vinegar, flour, butter, a pinch of salt. That was it. No lemons, because lemons were 1934 luxury food in rural Iowa. Vinegar pie was lemon pie for the people who lived 200 miles from any port that ever saw a citrus crate. The vinegar gave a tart bite. The eggs gave the silk. The crust was lard. A wedge cooled on a windowsill while the kids watched from the porch. Hotel boarding houses across the upper Midwest served it at a nickel, a slice through the worst years of the Depression. Number 22 became proof that desperation could still come out of the oven looking like dessert. The grandmother who made it never apologized for what was missing. Nobody at her table ever asked. Number 21. Shoofly pie. A wedge of dark, sticky molasses pie cooling on a Pennsylvania Dutch farmhouse table at 6 in the morning, served beside a tin cup of coffee strong enough to pull a plow. Shoofly pie was not dessert in Lancaster County. It was breakfast. The recipe came together with what a farm wife always had on hand: flour, lard, brown sugar, baking soda, and a glass jar of blackstrap molasses kept beside the stove. The name came either from the flies that swarmed the sweet filling on the windowsill or from a brand of molasses sold at the country general store. Either story is true depending on which Amish grandmother you asked. The wet bottom version oozed when you cut it. The dry bottom crumbled like cake. Both were better with a second cup of coffee. Both lived on the breakfast table from 1880 to 1965 in every Mennonite kitchen between Reading and Lancaster. Number 20. Johnny Cakes. A flat cast-iron griddle on the back of a cook stove in a clapboard farmhouse in South County, Rhode Island, hot enough to hiss when a drop of water hit it. The cook poured batter the consistency of thick cream, made from white-cap flint corn ground at Kenyon's grist mill not 5 miles down the road. 2 tablespoons spread to a perfect circle. She flipped them once. They came off crisp at the edge, soft as custard in the middle. A 1920s Rhode Island law still says a true Johnny Cake meal can only come from white-cap flint corn stone ground in Rhode Island. Anything else is a Johnny Cake with the H added. The Narragansett people taught the colonists how to grind it. 300 years later, the recipe still works the same way it did the first winter. The mill in Oscopaw still sells the meal in a paper sack with the same label your great-grandmother brought home. Number 19. Hush Puppies. A cast-iron Dutch oven of bubbling lard set over a campfire by the riverbank. The men were frying catfish in a second pot. The dogs would not stop barking at the smell. The cook scooped a spoonful of cornmeal batter, dropped it into the hot fat, and tossed each golden ball at the hound underfoot. Hush Puppy. The name stuck for 100 years. In small-town Tennessee and Mississippi, hush puppies meant the church fish fry under a willow tree, paper plates passed down a row of folding tables, and a lemonade jug sweating in the grass. The recipe was self-rising cornmeal, buttermilk, a chopped onion, and whatever salt was in the bag. 6 ingredients, 2 minutes in the fryer. They came out crackling. Here is the part most people miss. Hush puppies were never a recipe in a book. They were a story told on the riverbank, then on a back porch, then in a church cookbook somebody mimeographed in 1958. By the time the recipe got into the cookbook, 4 neighbors had changed it. One added sugar. One added a beaten egg. One swore the onion had to be grated, never chopped. The cookbook printed all 3. The reader picked one. Number 19 belonged to the river and to whoever had the deepest pot. Number 18. Cast iron cornbread. A black skillet the cook had inherited from her own mother, slick with bacon grease so old it had a name. She poured the cornmeal batter in while the skillet was still smoking on the wood stove. The bottom seared the second the batter hit. 25 minutes later, she flipped it onto a wooden board, and the crust shattered like glass. A wedge with cold milk poured over it was the supper she fed her grandchildren on the nights nobody had money for more. In Kansas and Missouri church cookbooks from 1955, cornbread shows up on more pages than meat. 5 cents a slice to make. Free if the corn came from your own field. The skillet outlived 3 husbands and 2 wood stoves, and the granddaughter still has it. She uses it every Sunday whether she needs to or not. Number 17. Threshing Crew Beef Stew. A coal range in a Kansas farmhouse kitchen in the summer of 1938, and 20 hungry harvest hands coming up from the fields at noon. The farm wife and her 2 oldest daughters had been up since 4. Beef cut into 2-inch chunks, browned in lard, simmered for hours with potatoes, carrots, onions, and whatever the garden had let go that morning. The pot held 5 gallons. The men ate 2 helpings each and asked for pie. The wife had baked 7 that morning: cherry, apple, raisin, and 4 lemon. This was not entertaining. This was the deal. You fed the threshing crew the way they expected, or no neighbor brought their team to your fields next August. Her reputation traveled with the steam. The men who ate at her table told other men who showed up the next year before sunup with their teams already harnessed. Number 16. Succotash, a wooden bowl of fresh field corn cut from the cob with a thumb-worn knife, mixed with shell beans and a chunk of salt pork the size of a fist. Number 16 came straight from the Wampanoag word msikwatash, which meant boiled whole kernels. The Pilgrims learned it the first winter and never let it go. 300 years later, a Pennsylvania farm wife still cooked it the same way every August when the corn and the lima beans ripened in the same week. She added cream from the morning milking and a pat of butter the size of a walnut. It went on the supper table beside fried ham and fresh tomatoes still warm from the patch. The dish was older than the country. Most kids ate it without ever knowing. But every grandmother in central Pennsylvania, central Ohio, and central Kentucky cooked it the same way you would have learned at her elbow, and the recipe never needed a card. Number 15. Canned green beans from the root cellar. A wooden shelf in a dirt-floored cellar under a Nebraska farmhouse lined 3 deep with quart mason jars. Each jar had a strip of masking tape with a date in pencil. August 1942. September 1942. A whole summer of bean snapping done at the kitchen table by 3 generations of women, the radio on low, the pressure canner hissing on the back burner. The Ball brothers had moved the jar factory to Muncie, Indiana in 1887, and by the 1930s, every farm wife in the Midwest had 100 jars on hand. You ate the August beans in February and tasted the garden. You ate them in April and tasted what was left of last year. The pressure canner itself was a hand-me-down. The grandmother had inherited hers from her mother in 1928. The dial on the front was scratched down to the metal from 40 years of use, and the rubber gasket got replaced once a decade. The USDA had ruled in 1917 that pressure canning was the only safe way to put up low-acid vegetables, and every county extension agent west of the Mississippi spent the next 50 years teaching it to farm wives. The radio show was the noon farm report from the local AM station. The kids snapped the ends off and ran the strings down the side. Number 15 was a calendar you could spoon out of a jar, and the kitchen table was the page on which the whole summer got written. Every January, when the snow came in sideways, you opened a jar and the kitchen smelled like July. The jar was empty by supper time, the lid back in the kitchen drawer, the empty quart waiting on the back porch for a soapy rinse and the next August harvest. But the cellar shelf in February was a calendar of survival. You could read the year on every strip of tape. You could see what the garden had given and what the family had lost. The shelf was honest. Your grandmother knew the math of it without ever opening a book. Number 14, dilly beans. A glass quart jar of crisp green beans standing upright in brine, packed with a clove of garlic, a head of dill, a dried red pepper, and a teaspoon of mustard seed. Dilly beans were what the canning ladies of central Wisconsin made when the pole beans came in faster than the family could eat them. The brine was vinegar, water, and pickling salt. The jars sat in a hot water bath for 10 minutes and then on the cellar shelf for 3 weeks before anybody touched one. By Thanksgiving, they snapped between your teeth like a fresh bean in July. The Lutheran church basement potluck was where dilly beans showed up beside the ham loaf and the 7-layer salad. Every woman swore her brine ratio was the right one. None of them shared it. The Sunday school teacher kept her recipe folded inside her grandmother's prayer book, which is where they found it after she passed in 1989. Number 13, Chow Chow Relish. The end of September in southwestern Pennsylvania. The garden had given everything it could give, and a green basket of tomatoes still hung on the vine that would never ripen. The grandmother chopped them anyway. Cabbage, onions, peppers, cauliflower, green beans, even a few carrots. Everything left went into a stock pot with vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, and turmeric. She cooked it down until the colors blurred and the kitchen smelled like a pickling barn. 8 pints from one afternoon. In Appalachia and Pennsylvania Dutch country, Chow Chow had a dozen names and 0 written recipes. The Was-Wit brand from the country store was sweeter. The homemade was sharper. A spoon of it on top of beans and cornbread was the difference between supper and a meal you remembered. And every Christmas, the granddaughters lined up at the cellar door, each carrying home a basket with 3 pints she had not been allowed to watch get made. Number 12. Watermelon rind pickle. A galvanized tub on a back porch in rural Missouri in August. The melon flesh had already been eaten on the church grounds after Sunday service, and the rinds came home in a feed sack. The cook peeled off the dark green skin, cubed the white flesh, and soaked it overnight in lime water. The next day, she boiled it in a syrup of cider vinegar, sugar, cinnamon stick, and whole cloves until the cubes turned glassy and translucent, sealed in pint jars, eaten at Christmas dinner with the ham. Number 12 was the country answer to wasting nothing. The hog ate the seeds, the chickens ate the trimmings. The family ate the rind, sweet and spiced, 6 months after the picnic. The empty jar went back on the cellar shelf to be filled again the following August when the church potluck rolled around for the next watermelon. Number 11. Tomato gravy on biscuits. The Appalachian breakfast nobody outside the mountains ever heard of. A spoonful of bacon grease in a cast-iron skillet, a handful of flour stirred in until it browned, then home-canned tomatoes broken up with the back of a wooden spoon. Salt, pepper, a pinch of sugar to round the acid. Poured over a split biscuit, it looked like sunset on a plate. In eastern Kentucky and the Ozarks, tomato gravy was what a woman made when there was no sausage in the smokehouse and no eggs in the coop, but she still had a dozen jars of last summer's tomatoes on the cellar shelf. It cost about 3 cents a serving. It tasted like the height of August in the middle of February. The biscuits soaked it up like a sponge. The jar went back to the cellar empty and labeled, ready for the next August canning day. Number 10. Tuna noodle hot dish. A 1950s Lutheran church basement in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, and a long table covered in casserole dishes that all looked like the same dish. Number 10 was the queen of them. A can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, introduced in 1934 and sold in every Plains general store by the case. A can of chicken of the sea tuna, a bag of egg noodles, a handful of frozen peas, crushed potato chips on top. The whole thing baked at 350 for 30 minutes. Hot dish came out of the oven at every funeral, every confirmation, every winter potluck north of Iowa. Campbell's published the recipe in a 1952 cookbook and sealed it into the heart of small-town American cooking. Number 10 fed grief, joy, and a Tuesday in January. The casserole dish came home washed, dried, and labeled with a strip of masking tape so the right woman got hers back. Number 9. County Fair mincemeat cake. A 2-layer cake from a recipe handed down through 4 generations of an Iowa farm family that took the blue ribbon at the State Fair Heirloom recipe competition 4 years running. The mincemeat was made in November from venison, suet, currants, raisins, apples, and a splash of brandy the husband had hidden behind the canning jars. The cake itself was a butter sponge, and the mincemeat went between the layers, iced with a boiled white frosting that set up like new snow on the back porch. The recipe lived inside a green index card box on top of the refrigerator for 40 years. After the grandmother passed in 1979, the family found the card pressed inside a Methodist church cookbook nobody had reprinted in 30 years. The granddaughter typed it up the same week. The cake is still served at the family Christmas every year. The county fair judges still remember the frosting. The recipe nearly did not survive the funeral. It survived because somebody wrote it down twice. That is the only reason any of these 25 recipes are still here at all. Somebody wrote it down. Somebody passed it on. Somebody made it again on a Tuesday in February when nobody was watching. Number 8. Salt pork and pinto beans. A heavy iron pot on a Plains kitchen stove, a pound of dried pintos that had soaked overnight, and a chunk of salt pork the cook had cut from a barrel in the smokehouse. She rinsed the salt off, dropped it in, and let the pot simmer for 6 hours. Salt pork was shelf-stable. It survived a month in a saddlebag, a winter in a barrel, a summer on a wagon trail. Pinto beans cost pennies a pound and stretched like nothing else in the pantry. A bowl of beans with a slice of fried salt pork on top was the meal that fed cowhands, sodbusters, and saloon customers from 1870 to 1955. The leftover broth went over cornbread the next morning. Nothing got thrown out. Not the beans, not the pork, not the pot liquor. The pot itself sat on the back of the stove all week, reheated every morning, growing more flavor with every day. Number 7. Ham and beans. A blue speckled enamelware pot on a Sunday stove in southern Indiana. A ham bone left over from Easter dinner, navy beans soaking in cold water on the counter, and an onion the cook quartered with a paring knife. The pot went on after church. By 6 in the evening, the kitchen smelled like the inside of a smokehouse. The bone gave up its last shreds of meat. The beans broke down to silk. A bowl of it, with a wedge of cornbread and a green tomato relish on the side, was Sunday supper for 40 cents. In small-town Indiana and Ohio, ham and beans was what the Methodist Ladies Auxiliary served at every fundraiser supper through the 1960s. $1 a plate. The line went out the church door and around the block. The women in the kitchen kept ladling until the last family in line had a bowl in their hands. Number 6. Hominy grits. A cast-iron pot on a back burner in rural Georgia, white grits bubbling like a slow lake at full boil. The cook stirred them with a long wooden spoon every 5 minutes for an hour. Stone-ground grits were not a side dish. They were the dish. A pat of butter melted into the hot bowl, a spoonful of bacon grease for richness, a grind of pepper, salt. That was breakfast, and that was supper. In small-town Georgia and South Carolina, the corn was hulled with lye in a wooden trough out back. Hominy was older than the South. The Cherokee called it canahina. The Creek made it 3 different ways. By the 1930s, every country general store sold a bag of grits cheaper than a pound of flour. A bowl of it stayed warm in a child's belly all the way to school. And the bowl your grandfather ate from was the same bowl his grandfather had eaten from, set on the same hook by the kitchen window. Number 5. Fried apples. A cast-iron skillet on a wood stove on a cold November morning. The cook cored 4 hard winter apples from the orchard, sliced them with the skin on, and dropped them into a pool of bacon grease, brown sugar, a little cinnamon, a splash of cider. She covered the pan and let them soften on a low fire while the biscuits rose in the oven. Fried apples were the Appalachian compromise between dessert and breakfast. They went on the plate next to ham and grits, sweet and savory at once. Her grandfather poured them over cornbread when the molasses ran out. The apples came from the dooryard tree. The grease came from the morning bacon. The whole dish cost what was already in the kitchen. The kitchen smelled the rest of the day like cinnamon and wood smoke, and somebody's grandmother who had been gone for 40 years. Number 4. Persimmon pudding. A baking dish of dark, dense pudding the color of wet earth, set on a plate with a snow of powdered sugar. The persimmons came from a wild tree on the back 40, gathered after the first frost when the fruit had finally turned soft and sweet. Hard persimmons would pucker your face for a week. The cook pushed the pulp through a sieve, mixed it with sugar, eggs, butter, milk, and a little cinnamon, and baked it slow for an hour. In southern Indiana, persimmon pudding was the most distinctive Thanksgiving dessert in the state. The town of Mitchell, Indiana, had been holding a persimmon festival every September since 1947. Number 4 was the recipe a Hoosier grandmother trusted to nobody. Even the church cookbook printed her name and not the proportions. And every November her grandchildren got a small dish wrapped in waxed paper, sent home in their coat pockets. Number 3. Pawpaw bread. The pawpaw was the largest native fruit in North America, and almost no one outside small-town Ohio and West Virginia had ever tasted one. The fruit grew in shaded river bottoms. It bruised the second you picked it. It rotted in 3 days. The cook gathered them in September, mashed the custardy yellow flesh with a fork, and stirred it into a quick bread batter with eggs, butter, and a teaspoon of vanilla. The loaf came out of the oven, smelling like banana, mango, and something the rest of the country never figured out how to grow. Pawpaw bread did not travel. It did not freeze well. It belonged to the families who lived within walking distance of the trees. Number 3 was the most regional recipe on this list, and the most likely to be lost. Every year, fewer people knew where the trees grew, and every year, fewer people walked back into the woods to pick them. Number 2. Peanut butter fudge. a block of soft, crumbling peanut butter fudge cooling on a sheet of waxed paper laid across the kitchen counter, set out the night before the church bake sale. The recipe had 3 ingredients: a jar of peanut butter, a bag of confectioner's sugar, a stick of butter. The cook melted them together, poured the mixture into a buttered pan, and let it set on the back porch in the November cold. Cut into squares with a buttered knife, wrapped in waxed paper, sold for 10 cents a piece at the basement table next to the lemon bars. In small-town Tennessee and Kentucky, peanut butter fudge was the easy entry into the candy table at every Christmas bazaar from 1948 to 1979. It outsold everything but the divinity. Every grandmother had her own way of pulling it off the heat at the exact second it would still cut clean. Number 1. Divinity Candy. A copper saucepan on a Texas stove on a clear, cold December morning. The cook had been waiting 3 days for low humidity because Divinity would not set if the air held water, sugar, corn syrup, water, salt. Boiled to a hard ball. Poured slowly in a thin, steady stream over stiff egg whites in the green stand mixer her husband had given her in 1958. The mixer ran for 10 minutes while she added vanilla and chopped pecans from her own backyard tree. She dropped the candy by the spoonful onto waxed paper and walked away while it set. Divinity was a Christmas candy from 1915 onward, Southern by adoption because of the pecans. Number 1 was on every holiday plate in small-town Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. A tin of it under a Christmas tree was the gift that lasted until New Year's. But every grandmother knew the difference between a Divinity batch that set and a Divinity batch that wept, and the difference came down to whether the back door had been left open while the candy cooled. Fruit cocktail with whipped topping was the shortcut dessert that made every child grin and every tired parent sigh in relief. All it took was 1 can of fruit cocktail, peaches, pears, grapes, and cherries in syrup, drained and stirred together with a big dollop of whipped topping from the tub. Served chilled, it was creamy, sweet, and light enough to finish off any meal. In the 1970s, this was the go-to dessert for last-minute guests, potlucks, or just a Tuesday night. You could jazz it up with coconut, marshmallows, or chopped nuts, but the plain version had its own charm. The whipped topping clung to every fruit piece, turning even a grape into something decadent. Best of all, you could keep both ingredients on hand for weeks. No baking, no prep, no problem. It was one of those nostalgic little treats that sat at the corner of convenience and comfort, always cold, always sweet, and always gone within minutes. Tomato soup with rice was a Depression-era lunch that combined simplicity with a great deal of comfort. You didn't need much in order to make it. Just a can of tomatoes, or even water and tomato paste, a handful of rice, and any seasoning you like. This was the perfect meal for a cold, rainy day when you needed something warm and filling that could stretch your ingredients and make them last a week. Rice was the main deal here. It could bulk up the soup, turning a thin tomato broth into a hearty meal. With rice, you can always assume that a little goes a long way, and it turned what could have been a sad bowl of red water into a meal that actually felt like food. Plus, rice was very cheap, so adding that to your meals meant you made sure that a small pot of soup could feed the whole family. And while it wasn't really gourmet, you could get your creative freak on and make it special. A few tricks included adding a pinch of sugar to cut the acidity and a pinch of garlic powder to make it zesty. Tomato soup with rice was the kind of meal that will get you through hard times, without making you feel like you were missing out on some great delicacy. It was simple, satisfying, and budget-friendly. Potted meat and crackers provided quick, shelf-stable lunch protein for seniors who needed no-fuss meals ready in moments. Those small cans of spreadable meat paste, often pork or chicken-based, cost mere pennies and required no refrigeration until opened. The meat spread easily on saltines, rye crisps, or Melba toast, creating bite-sized portions that could be eaten while reading or listening to the radio. For seniors living alone, this lunch represented pure convenience since crackers stayed fresh in sleeves and meat cans stacked neatly in pantries. The flavor was salty and intensely meaty, a little going far when spread thinly across crackers. Some added pickle slices or mustard to brighten the richness, though many ate the combination plain. The protein helped maintain energy through afternoon hours when larger meals felt burdensome. This wasn't glamorous eating, but it was practical sustenance, acknowledging the reality of cooking for one. Though still sold in stores, potted meat has disappeared from respectable lunch fare. Cold macaroni and pickle salad was the kind of thing that showed up unannounced at summer picnics and somehow vanished faster than anything else on the table. Made with leftover elbow macaroni, chopped dill pickles, a spoonful of mayonnaise, and maybe some celery or onion if you had it, this dish was a masterclass in making do. It was creamy, tangy, crunchy, and came together in under 10 minutes if the pasta was already cooked. During the 1950s through the 1970s, this was a back-pocket recipe for frugal families who needed lunch or a side dish in a hurry. It kept well in the fridge, traveled nicely in wax paper or plastic tubs, and paired beautifully with sandwiches or fried meats. The pickles added just enough brightness to cut through the richness of the mayo, and the pasta made it filling without being heavy. It might not have had the elegance of a soufflé or the flash of a molded salad, but it had staying power. One bite, and you would swear you were back at your aunt's backyard table in midsummer. Carrot and potato hash was a Depression-era staple that made the most out of two cheap and hearty veggies. Potatoes were filling while carrots added just enough sweetness to keep things interesting. This meal was perfect for stretching a limited budget because both ingredients were as cheap as they come, lasted forever, and could be found in almost every kitchen. The preparation was simple. Chop up the vegetables, toss them in a hot pan, and fry until golden and crispy. It was simple, but the combination of soft potatoes and slightly caramelized carrots created a comforting, flavorful dish. If you had an onion lying around, it could join the party, adding even more depth to this humble hash. The beauty of carrot and potato hash is in its versatility. You could eat it on its own or throw an egg on top for some protein. Either way, it was filling, warm, and super satisfying. Everything you needed to keep going during tough times. It wasn't the most exciting dish, but it got the job done. And isn't that what really counts? Canned corned beef hash transformed from breakfast fare into a satisfying lunch when seniors needed something hot and filling without elaborate preparation. The can contained pre-mixed corned beef and potatoes that fried up crispy in a skillet with minimal attention, creating a meal that tasted far more substantial than its modest cost suggested. For those living alone, one can provide enough hash for a generous serving with perhaps some left for tomorrow. The preparation required only opening the can, scooping contents into a hot skillet, and pressing down until a golden crust formed. Some added a fried egg on top, though many ate it plain with ketchup. The salty, meaty flavor satisfied cravings for something savory and warm, especially on cold days. Canned hash kept indefinitely in pantries, ready whenever the mood struck. At roughly 35 cents per can, it represented remarkable value for protein and carbohydrates. This humble canned product sustained generations who understood that convenience and economy could coexist. The mayonnaise and banana sandwich is the kind of recipe that sounds like a dare, but was once a very real part of many American lunches. During the 1970s, this sweet and creamy pairing showed up in school lunchboxes, kitchen counters, and budget cookbooks alike. You took 2 slices of white bread, spread each with a generous layer of mayonnaise, and placed sliced bananas in between. The result was soft, tangy, sweet, and absolutely polarizing. Some kids loved it, others traded it away. But it was quick, cheap, and surprisingly rich in calories, making it a go-to for households trying to fill stomachs without emptying wallets. Some families added a shake of cinnamon, a drizzle of honey, or even crushed peanuts to give it extra flair. But the classic version kept it simple and strange. Today, it is more of a nostalgic curiosity than a mainstream snack, but anyone who grew up with it remembers the creamy texture, the faint zing of mayo, and the shock of how oddly well it worked. If you were in a rush, out of lunch meat, or just adventurous enough, this sandwich was waiting in the wings. Moving on to something sweet for a second, rice pudding with raisins. It was a Depression-era answer to a comforting dessert made from almost nothing. Leftover rice, milk or water, some sugar, and a handful of raisins were all it took to make your kids happy with a sweet treat. The magic happened when the rice simmered down into a creamy, pudding-like consistency, turning something so plain into a dessert that felt a little indulgent. Raisins were the main show here. They added the perfect amount of taste and texture, making it taste fancy rather than ordinary. Just the thought of raisins makes me want to retch. I truly admire the strength our ancestors had when they were able to eat food like this. Don't get me wrong, I love rice pudding. But raisins? No way, not a chance. The best part about rice pudding is how flexible the recipe could be. If you were like me and didn't like raisins, you could just sprinkle some cinnamon on top. Or maybe even a splash of vanilla if you were feeling fancy. For families looking to make a warm, sweet, and filling dessert, rice pudding with raisins was the perfect way to go. It satisfied almost every sweet tooth without costing much, making it a household favorite. Plus, it was really simple to make, so even the kids could help and stir the pot. Some of those kids are now our grandparents teaching us those same recipes. How beautiful is that? Peanut butter on crackers served as the no-nonsense lunch that required absolutely nothing beyond opening a jar and a sleeve of saltines. For seniors living alone, this combination provided protein, fat, and carbohydrates in a form needing no refrigeration, no cooking, and no cleanup beyond wiping a knife. The peanut butter's richness satisfied hunger in ways that plain crackers never could, while the salt enhanced the nutty sweetness. A jar of peanut butter cost roughly 40 cents and lasted weeks, making it one of the most economical protein sources available. The crackers stayed fresh in their wax paper sleeves, ready whenever appetite struck. This wasn't a meal that impressed anyone, but it kept energy levels stable through afternoon hours. Many seniors ate this combination while reading or watching television, appreciating that it could be consumed without sitting at a table. Though simple to the point of seeming inadequate, peanut butter on crackers sustained countless quiet lunchtimes. Hot dog and baked bean skillet dinners were born from the marriage of convenience and childhood cravings. They required almost no prep. Just slice up a few hot dogs, toss them in a hot pan, and once they started to brown and curl at the edges, pour in a can of baked beans. That was it. You stirred it around until everything was bubbling, then served it straight from the pan. It was fast, filling, and full of flavor, especially when the bean sauce soaked into the crisped edges of the hot dogs. In the 1960s and 1970s, this was a common weeknight rescue meal. No chopping, no measuring, and no need for side dishes unless you wanted toast or coleslaw on the plate. Kids loved it. Adults tolerated it. But everyone appreciated how little cleanup it took. You could add mustard or brown sugar if you were feeling fancy, or just leave it plain and let the sweet-savory combo do its work. It was the ultimate 10-minute hot meal when your brain was fried and your fridge was nearly empty. The savory grilled cheese sandwich was the Depression-era comfort food that made even the simplest meal feel indulgent and like you were having a feast. With just bread and cheese, you could create a warm, melty sandwich that instantly lifted your spirits and comforted you during the hard times. The bread was cheap, and cheese was a luxury, but a little bit went a long way when you fried it up between two slices of bread. The secret to a perfect grilled cheese was in the toasting. You'd butter the bread or use whatever fat you had. Lard worked too, and fry it in a hot pan until golden brown and crispy. The cheese would melt inside, creating a gooey center that made this sandwich popular to this day, even though the ingredients were simple. If you were lucky, you could add extras like tomatoes or onions, but even on its own, a grilled cheese sandwich was a crowd pleaser. This meal was quick, easy, and, most importantly, cheap. It was perfect for lunch or dinner, and you didn't need much to make it satisfying. In tough times, a grilled cheese sandwich was a little slice of comfort, proving that even the most basic ingredients could come together to create something delicious. Hot tomato soup with saltines represented perhaps the most iconic simple lunch for seniors living alone, combining warmth, flavor, and affordability in a single bowl. Campbell's condensed soup cost roughly 12 cents per can, and stretched to serve one generously when mixed with water or milk. The soup heated quickly on the stovetop, filling the kitchen with familiar aromas that signaled lunchtime. Saltine crackers floated on top or accompanied the bowl, their salty crunch providing textural contrast to the smooth, tangy soup. For those eating alone, this lunch offered psychological comfort alongside physical nourishment since the warm bowl felt like care and attention. The soup's smooth texture went down easily for those with dental concerns. A sleeve of crackers lasted weeks, making them economical pantry staples. This pairing sustained generations of seniors through quiet lunchtimes, requiring minimal effort. Though soup cans remain on shelves, the ritual of crackers floating in tomato soup has largely faded from daily practice. The quick bologna and egg scramble was the kind of dish you could throw together half asleep, and it still somehow tasted like a full breakfast. Dice up a few slices of bologna, toss them into a frying pan, and once they started to sizzle and brown, crack in a couple of eggs and stir. That was it. You could finish cooking it in less than 10 minutes, and it paired perfectly with toast or even wrapped inside a slice of white bread for an on-the-go bite. It became a staple in working-class kitchens from the 1950s to the 1970s, especially for early risers who needed something hot before heading to work or school. Bologna was cheap and easy to store, eggs were almost always on hand, and together they made a hearty, salty, protein-packed dish. Some added onions or cheese, but most kept it plain and quick. The smell alone could drag people out of bed. And the best part? You only dirtied one pan. Deviled eggs with pickles were a treat that turned humble ingredients into something delicious, back in the day. Eggs were a cheap, reliable protein source, and if you had a jar of pickles, you were already halfway to creating something fancy, by 1930s standards anyway. Making deviled eggs is nothing revolutionary. Just hard-boil them, scoop out the yolk, and mix with a little mayo, mustard, and the thing that ties it all together: pickles. The pickles added a crunch that took the eggs from plain food to a party snack. However, the only party trick was surviving yet another day on a shoestring budget. People loved deviled eggs because they felt like a special treat, even when times were tough. The pickles added that little something extra, like a surprise flavor bomb in the middle of your egg. Plus, it was a great way to stretch a meal. Eggs were filling and they were perfect for families who had to make do with limited supplies. Whether served at lunch or as a snack, deviled eggs with pickles were a fun, zesty way to make an ordinary ingredient feel a little more special. Creamed corn on toast transformed a humble canned vegetable into a warm, comforting lunch that could be ready in minutes. Seniors living alone during the 1950s and 1960s often kept cans of creamed corn stacked in pantries, knowing they could heat one on the stovetop and pour it directly over buttered toast for a filling midday meal. The cream-style corn needed no additional preparation, its thick texture clinging to the bread while the natural sweetness balanced the butter's richness. Some cooks added a dash of black pepper, but the dish required no elaborate seasoning to satisfy. For those on fixed incomes, creamed corn represented remarkable value at roughly 15 cents per can, enough to top 2 or 3 slices of toast. The combination provided both carbohydrates and vegetables, offering balanced nutrition without complicated cooking. This was practical food for practical people, requiring only a saucepan and 5 minutes of attention. Though largely forgotten today, creamed corn on toast once filled stomachs across America. Cottage cheese and pineapple salad was a cold dish that made its way onto countless dinner plates in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s without ever needing an oven or a skillet. It was a mix of convenience and charm, using just a scoop of creamy cottage cheese, a few chunks of canned pineapple, and a single crisp lettuce leaf as a bed. Some versions even topped the whole thing with a glossy red maraschino cherry for visual flair, making it feel like a mini dessert that snuck onto the dinner table. It was served as a salad, a side, or sometimes even a light dessert, perfect for hot evenings or last-minute guests. Housewives appreciated it because it required no cooking and could be assembled in under 10 minutes with ingredients straight from the pantry and fridge. It had the creamy, sweet, tangy flavor balance that defined so many mid-century American dishes. Maybe it sounds strange today, but back then, it was standard on picnic spreads, potluck tables, and family dinners. If you saw that cherry on top, you knew exactly what was underneath. Fried corn fritters were a Depression-era favorite because they made something out of almost nothing. Cornmeal was cheap, filling, and very versatile, so in times when money was tight, corn fritters were everyone's go-to. All you needed was a little cornmeal, flour, water, or milk, and an egg if you could afford one. Mix it all up, fry it in some oil, and lunch is served. These fritters were the perfect way to turn pastry staples into something delicious. They were crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and packed with flavor. And because cornmeal was so affordable, you could whip up a batch without thinking about how much money it cost. You could even throw in whatever you had in the house to stretch it even more and add nutritional value. Any leftover veggies or cheese added more flavor to the meal, making it even more comforting. Corn fritters were the kind of meal that made you feel resourceful and proved that even in hard times, you could take a handful of basic ingredients and make them into something delicious. Welsh rarebit was once the sophisticated cousin of plain cheese toast, transforming simple ingredients into something that felt almost elegant for lunch alone. The dish began with a thick sauce made from sharp cheddar melted slowly with butter, a splash of beer or milk, and a dash of Worcestershire sauce. This golden, bubbling mixture was poured over toasted bread and placed under the broiler until the edges turned brown and crispy. For seniors living alone in the 1950s and 1960s, Welsh rarebit represented an affordable indulgence requiring only pantry staples. The cheese provided protein and calcium, while the toast offered filling carbohydrates that satisfied without waste. One slice was often enough for lunch, making it economical for single-serving preparation. The dish carried memories of lunch counters where it appeared on menus as something special. Though rarely made today, Welsh rarebit proved that cheese on toast could become a meal worthy of sitting down to enjoy. Sardines and mustard on toast was the salty, briny pick-me-up that required almost no time and absolutely no apology. This was not a dish for the timid. In fact, opening a can of sardines was practically a declaration of independence in mid-century kitchens. You laid out your slices of toast, usually buttered and still warm, then carefully placed the sardines on top, sometimes whole, sometimes mashed slightly with a fork. A quick dab of mustard across the top gave it brightness and bite. Some people added sliced onion or a splash of lemon juice, but others left it exactly as it was, bold, oily, and rich in protein. Sardines were cheap, shelf-stable, and packed with nutrition. In the 1950s through the 1970s, this was a lunch you could count on, especially for workers and retirees who wanted something hearty but fast. It filled the belly, cleared the sinuses, and let everyone know you were not afraid of strong flavors. Whether eaten standing over the sink or seated with a folded napkin, this was the kind of 10-minute meal that made a lasting impression. While we're on the topic of sweets, let's talk about baked apples with cinnamon. They were the ultimate Depression-era dessert which could turn just a few apples into something that felt warm and comforting. Apples were relatively inexpensive and easy to come by, and baking them with a sprinkle of cinnamon transformed them into a dessert that made everyone feel like they were indulging. Making baked apples was as simple as coring the apples, placing them in a dish, and stuffing the centers with a mix of cinnamon, sugar, and maybe a little butter if you had some. And into the oven they'd go. In a matter of minutes, your house smelled like a bakery from dreams. The apples would soften. Their natural sweetness was enhanced by the cinnamon, and the result was a dish that felt way more luxurious than it actually was. This was a dessert that required very few ingredients, but the payoff was huge. It was warm and delicious, and made you feel like you were eating something truly special, even in the middle of hard times. Whether served on their own or with a bit of cream if you had it, baked apples with cinnamon were a simple pleasure that lifted spirits without draining the pantry. Canned salmon patties transformed affordable pantry protein into crispy, satisfying lunch fare that seniors could prepare in small batches. A single can of pink salmon, costing roughly 30 cents, provided enough fish for several patties when mixed with crushed crackers, egg, and minced onion. The mixture was shaped into rounds and fried in oil until golden brown on both sides. For seniors living alone, salmon patties offered the advantage of being made fresh in whatever quantity was needed since the canned fish kept indefinitely. 2 patties served between bread or alongside vegetables made a complete lunch, providing protein and satisfaction. The recipe required no precise measurements and forgave substitutions, making it accessible for those who rarely cooked elaborate meals. Many seniors learned to make these patties during the Depression and carried the habit into retirement. The soft bones in canned salmon provided valuable calcium. Though canned salmon still fills shelves, the art of patty making has largely disappeared. The American cheese and tomato open-faced melt was as simple as it was satisfying. You grabbed a slice of white sandwich bread, laid down a slice of tomato, sometimes salted, sometimes not, and placed a square of processed American cheese over it. Then it went under the broiler for a couple of minutes until the cheese started to bubble and melt into the tomato. The corners of the bread crisped up while the middle stayed soft. What came out was gooey, warm, and somehow always more delicious than the sum of its parts. It was popular in the 1950s and 1960s, when quick lunches had to be hot but easy, and families did not want to waste electricity on the stove. You could whip up a tray of these in no time, and people would fight over the browned, blistered cheese on top. Some folks added oregano or a splash of hot sauce, but most kept it plain. It was the kind of dish that taught kids how to use the oven and how to make something delicious out of almost nothing. Savory bread pudding with leftover veggies was the ultimate Depression-era hack for turning scraps into a hearty meal. Got stale bread? Perfect. Leftover veggies that are past their prime? Even better. This dish was all about not wasting a thing. People couldn't afford to throw food away during the Great Depression, but instead, they got creative. And this meal was one of those everything but the kitchen sink meals that you might have heard your grandma or great-grandma talking about. To make it, you had to tear up the stale bread, mix it with eggs and milk and whatever leftover vegetables you had lying around. It could be basically anything. Carrots, peas, whatever didn't make the cut for last night's dinner. Season it with salt and pepper and maybe some herb seasoning and bake until it is golden and crispy on top, but soft and warm inside. The best part about savory bread pudding was that it made something delicious out of things you would usually throw away. And the Great Depression didn't look kindly upon those who didn't know how to save up. Stale bread was transformed from slices into a cozy meal that tasted like it took more effort than it actually did. This dish proved that even in hard times, you could make a meal out of practically nothing. Bread and milk bowl was the simplest possible lunch, yet it sustained seniors across America when appetites were small or budgets impossibly tight. This wasn't a recipe so much as a survival strategy, combining torn pieces of bread with cold or warm milk in a bowl, sometimes sprinkled with sugar. The bread softened in the milk, creating something between cereal and soup that required no cooking and minimal chewing. During the 1940s through the 1960s, many elderly folks turned to this combination when other foods seemed too heavy to prepare. The meal provided calcium from the milk and carbohydrates from the bread, offering basic nutrition when appetites had diminished. Some variations used stale bread specifically, since soaking in milk revived even the driest crusts. The dish cost mere pennies, making it accessible even during the leanest weeks before pension checks arrived. Children who visited grandparents often remembered seeing this humble bowl. Bread and milk bowl remains a powerful symbol of resourceful simplicity. The peanut butter and lettuce sandwich is one of those Depression-era holdovers that makes people raise their eyebrows until they try it. At first glance, it seems almost like a dare. Why would anyone put crisp lettuce between slices of bread slathered with peanut butter? But during the 1930s and 1940s, it was an easy, no-cook meal that hit the sweet spot between nutrition and convenience. Peanut butter brought protein and staying power, while iceberg lettuce added crunch and a faint, watery freshness that balanced the stickiness. It was one of those clever tricks where texture did all the heavy lifting. Some families made it fancier with a drizzle of honey, others added thin apple slices or a dash of salt. But the basic version, just peanut butter, lettuce, and soft sandwich bread, was quick, cheap, and surprisingly refreshing. It traveled well in lunchboxes and showed up on supper tables when time or money was tight. These days, it has mostly disappeared from menus, but if you grew up with it, you might remember how odd it looked and how oddly good it actually was. Onion and potato frittata was an everyday favorite because they turned simple ingredients into a meal that felt special. Potatoes were cheap and filling, and onions added the extra flavor. The beauty of frittata was in its simplicity. You'd slice up some potatoes and onions, fry them until golden, and then pour beaten eggs over the top. Cook it until the eggs are set, and just like that, you had a hearty, savory dish that worked for any meal. It was one of those dishes that could stretch to feed a crowd. Plus, if you had a little cheese lying around, you were going to become a favorite lunch host. It was an easy way to make a meal feel complete without having to use any expensive ingredients. This frittata was super versatile as well. You could throw in whatever veggies or leftovers you had on hand. Whether eaten for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, onion and potato frittata was a reliable go-to that made the most out of limited supplies and left you feeling full and satisfied. It proved that a little creativity could vastly change the food game in the house. Vienna sausages and crackers served as the self-contained lunch that required no cooking, no refrigeration, and no cleanup beyond disposing of the can. Those small, soft sausages packed in briny liquid provided ready-to-eat protein that seniors living alone could access whenever hunger struck. A can cost roughly 15 cents and contained enough sausages to pair with crackers for a complete, if modest, midday meal. The sausages had a mild flavor and tender texture that some found comforting while others tolerated as practical sustenance. Eaten straight from the can with crackers, this lunch could be assembled in under 10 minutes without dirtying pots or pans. For elderly folks on fixed incomes, Vienna sausages represented protein that lasted indefinitely and required nothing beyond opening the can. Some included mustard for dipping, but many ate them plain. The lunch carried associations with simple times when elaborate preparation seemed unnecessary. Vienna sausages have largely disappeared from consideration as proper lunch fare. Simple egg drop soup was a staple because it took next to nothing to make, but still felt like a real meal. What you needed was some broth, homemade or from whatever scraps you could find, and a few eggs. You'd bring a broth to a simmer, whisk the eggs in a bowl, and slowly and carefully drizzle them in a hot liquid while stirring. The eggs would instantly cook, turning into soft, silky ribbons that made the soup what it is to this day. If you've got leftover veggies, be prepared to make this soup, and if you've got meat, even better. You've just made yourself a delicacy. Egg drop soup was a meal that stretched what little you had left while still managing to be comforting and filling. Even if you were running low on ingredients, egg drop soup made you feel like you were eating something homemade and special, instead of scraps you could barely gather. It could warm you up, fill you up, and the best thing of all, it took you, maybe and only maybe, about 5 minutes to make. Open-faced cheese dreams turned simple ingredients into something that felt special enough to serve on real plates with proper attention. The preparation began with buttered bread topped with sliced cheese, then placed under the broiler until the cheese bubbled and turned golden brown at the edges. This wasn't merely cheese toast, but a composed dish that seniors living alone could make feel like an event worth sitting down to enjoy. The broiling transformed ordinary American or cheddar into something almost sophisticated, with crispy edges and molten centers that satisfied deeply. Some cooks added tomato slices beneath the cheese, variations that stretched a simple concept into infinite possibilities. For those cooking alone, cheese dreams offered portion control, since each slice of bread represented a deliberate serving. The ingredients cost mere pennies and required no special shopping, making this lunch accessible any day. Though the name has faded from vocabulary, broiled cheese on toast remains comfort food at its purest. Cheddar and apple butter toast sounds like something out of a fancy cafe, but it was actually a humble 10-minute snack from old farm kitchens. You took a slice of white or wheat bread, spread on a layer of sweet, spiced apple butter, then laid a slice of cheddar cheese on top. Pop it under the broiler or in a toaster oven just long enough to warm it through and melt the edges of the cheese. The result? A gooey, sharp, sweet snack that made no sense on paper, but all the sense in your mouth. It was especially popular in the autumn, when apple butter was fresh and cheddar was always in the fridge. Farmers and school kids alike loved it for how fast it came together and how deeply comforting it felt. It had the tang of cheese, the warmth of apples, and the soft crunch of toast. And while it rarely showed up on restaurant menus, it became a beloved secret in home kitchens across the 1940s and 1950s. A bite of this is like a time capsule of cozy flavor. Fried rice with vegetables was the ultimate Depression-era hack for making leftovers exciting again. Day-old rice was the perfect base because it was cheap, filling, and easy to stretch. And just like with rice pudding with raisins, rice came to steal the show. You'd take whatever vegetables were on hand, carrots, peas, onions, or anything nearing its expiration date, toss them in a hot pan with a bit of oil, and fry it all together until golden and fragrant. Nothing, and I mean nothing, goes to waste. This dish was about making the most of what you had. It didn't matter if the veggies were a little past their prime because once they hit the pan, they were given a new life. A little soy sauce or garlic added a ton of flavor, and if you were lucky enough to have an egg, you could crack one in for extra protein. The fried rice was a genius way to turn scraps into something satisfying. It was fast, flavorful, and filling, everything you needed in a meal when times were tough. Plus, it was incredibly versatile. You could throw in any leftover meat or keep it vegetarian, and it would still be a hearty dish that stretched the food budget. These 25 recipes built the kitchens of small-town America for 100 years. They were free or cheap. They were taught hand to hand without a single measuring cup. They fed harvest crews, church suppers, county fairs, and Sunday tables that sat 8 without a leaf. Here is the question for you. Which one of these recipes did your grandmother make? Tell us in the comments. The screen door, the wood stove, the copper kettle, and the cast iron skillet are mostly gone. The recipes are not. They are still on cards in shoeboxes, in church cookbooks held together with rubber bands. Pull one out this week. Make it the way she did.